do
At
it.
this time, we'd like to call to order, what's the date? The August 19, 2014 Board of Zoning Appeals meeting. If you would, please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time I'd like to introduce the board members, starting on my left.
Subit Shah. Todd Chernick.
Christopher Bluer.
Gary Willis. The Board of Zoning Appeals is a quasi-legal board composed of resident volunteers of the City of Milton. The board is charged with hearing requests or variances from the standards of the zoning ordinance and appeals of administrative determinations. With regard to decisions on primary variances, the board's basis for decision is provided by these four considerations. A, relief if granted would not offend the spirit or intent of the ordinance, and B, there are such extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions pertaining to the particular piece of property that the literal or strict application of the ordinance would create an unnecessary hardship due to size, shape, or topography, or other extraordinary and exceptional situations or conditions not caused by the variance applicant. And C, relief if granted would not cause a substantial detriment to the public good and surrounding properties. And D, that the public safety, health, and welfare are secured and a substantial justice is done. Are there any adoptions or amendments to this agenda this evening? If not, we need a motion to adopt as written.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to adopt the August 19th agenda as it's been presented.
Do we have a second? Any discussion? All in favor of the adoption, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Passed unanimously. Need to approve the July meeting minutes. Need a motion?
Mr. Chair, I make a motion to approve the July 2014 BZA meeting minutes.
Do we have a second?
A second.
Discussion? All in favor of approval of the July 2014 BZA meeting minutes, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Passed unanimously. Consideration of primary variances, V14-001, 234 Burwell Drive. Angela, will you please present?
Mr. Chair, staff would like to request that this case be withdrawn. The applicant has been able to move the location of the sport court so that she no longer needs a variance.
Okay.
We need
I make a motion to allow the withdrawal of V14-011. Go ahead.
I'll second.
Discussion? All in favor of allowing the petitioner to remove V14-011, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign. Passed. V14-012, 15800 Birmingham Highway. Angela, would you like to present?
Yes, sir. The site, 15800 Birmingham Highway, is the location of the Birmingham Village Commercial Center, located on the southwest corner of Hickory Flat Road and Birmingham Highway. It is zoned MIX per 2004 Z0116. The current owner, Leonard Jacklett, purchased the last two available offices from Armstrong Development in February of 2013. When the buildings were purchased, Armstrong Development required licensed parking for all buildings. The licensed parking agreement assigned to these buildings consisted of 13 parking spaces with 2 handicap parking spaces for a total of 15. At the time of purchase, Mr. Jacklett assumed that the parking would be adequate. Section 64-1410 requires 2.8 spaces for each 1,000 square feet of office space. With a total of 11,792 square feet, these two buildings would require 33 parking spaces. The owner feels that more parking is required in order to promote any future sales or leases of office space. Staff notes that the entire development consists of 23,881 square feet of office space. This would require 67 parking spaces per current parking requirements. There are approximately 76 spaces on the property currently. For section 64237, a 50-foot undisturbed buffer is required adjacent to AG1 property along the west side of the property line. The property adjacent to the west property line is zoned AG1 and includes an unoccupied house and barn. Excuse me. The applicant proposes to reduce the buffer to 10 feet. In this space, he proposes to add 19 parking spaces. This will provide his buildings a total of 34 spaces. He will also add a 5-foot sidewalk between buildings 100 and 200 for ease of access to the new parking. The applicant has stated that no commercial buildings will be parked in the new parking area. Because Mr. Jacklett proposes to reduce the 50-foot buffer to 10 feet in order to accommodate this new parking area, a variance is required. On July 8, 2014, the DRB offered the following comments. Flip the parking so that it is adjacent to the buildings. Use pervious pavers. A tree island is required for every 5 spaces. Meet with adjacent property owner to work out issues. Additional department comments. The staff held a focus meeting on July 7, 2014, in which the following comments were provided. Building plan review, no comments. Site plan review, the applicant will need to comply with stormwater regulations. Arborist, the area requested in variance was previously landscaped per buffer requirements and is presently functioning to meet that requirement. If a variance is granted, staff recommends, number 1, the entire area adjacent to AG1 should be revegetated as much as practical and in such a way to provide screening between the 2 uses, as well as being planted to screen as much as possible from Hickory Flat Road. Relocate parking spaces toward buildings. Number 3, install 2 additional parking islands. 4, parking lots shall be of impervious material. 5, no utilities in parking islands or parking bays. And 6, 1 2-inch caliper canopy shade tree installed in each parking bay and or island. DOT stormwater. The applicant should submit a stormwater concept plan to Jim Seba prior to submitting for an LDP. The standards for consideration were read earlier, and the applicant responds as follows. The current parking situation has provided an extreme hardship for the owner to not be able to sell or lease any of the office space efficiently in the 2 buildings. The additional parking would be in the rear of the buildings and will have no effect on surrounding property owners adjacent to the property. The remaining 10-foot landscape buffer will include existing mature trees that will remain. Additional understory plantings will be added. Also, the existing trees screening on the north and south side of the proposed parking will not be altered. This will allow there to be no visual impact from Hickory Flat Road or the adjoining property. The neighbors in the area will have no adverse effect on their property from a visual perspective or from any driving conditions. Recommended conditions. Should the board choose to approve the application, staff recommends the following conditions. The new parking area shall be made of pervious material. Parking lot tree islands, plantings, etc. to meet ordinance requirements. The landscape plans shall be per the approval of the city arborist. The buffer area shall be revegetated in order to provide screening for the adjacent property as well as Hickory Flat Road. Buffer planning plan per the approval of the city arborist. And no parking of commercial vehicles shall be allowed in the new parking area. This concludes the staff presentation.
Introduce yourself, please, sir.
My name's Walter Recook.
Any questions to staff from the board regarding this application? Yes, sir.
Counselor? Sir? We obviously are rehearing this from last month, and I understand why. Are we able to take into consideration any of the testimony from last month, or is everything anew?
To the extent that it has been submitted in writing in the file, it's part of the file. You should base your decision on what the testimony provided tonight.
but not the testimony from last month.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? At this time, we'd like to invite the applicant to present. And the one thing we'd like to know is you have 10 minutes to present. And then anybody in opposition, you all have a total of 10 minutes for all of you together. So you either come up and spend 2 minutes each, or one person can take the whole 10 minutes. But you get 10 minutes for the opposition. Come ahead, if you would, please state your name and address to the board.
I'm Leonard Jacklett. The building's 15800 Birmingham Highway. Appreciate being here again. Wanted to, I guess, begin by saying that according to our last discussion, everything that we proposed last time is the same. Nothing has changed or altered. I also want to make it clear that all of your suggestions and conditions on the last round are absolutely, we're in agreement with. So moving forward, I'd like to tell you that last time we did go through, and if we have a moment, we'll go through the power presentation again, but I know you have it really right in front of you. Wanted to address really some other items since the last time and beyond the PowerPoint presentation. One, there was a little confusion last time with our association in our village. And I want to let you know that since that time, we have had a full board staff meetings, and we have a full written and signed resolution and unanimous agreement that we have a hardship, and everybody in the village is in agreement we would like to have the additional parking. So I know that was a situation, if you recall, last time, and that has been resolved. Also,
has that been submitted to staff, that signed resolution?
you know, I actually had forgotten to. I copied it on my home computer, and I've got one copy here if anybody would like to see that.
Yes, please.
Councilor, thank you.
Yes, that'd be fine. And second to that, I've had time to speak a little further with Mark on the our arborist, Mark Law. And we have kind of reviewed the existing plan, and so he's aware of what we're going to do. So he's going to work with us very diligently on the proper screening, making it very, very acceptable to the neighborhood and to what we're trying to accomplish. The other thing I want to tell you from last time, I had the privilege of talking to a few more neighbors. I've gotten to speak to Tom, as you know, last time, which I'd like to point out. I want to make it clear all of Tom's concerns we also agree with. I believe the last round he added a full rail fence along with the proper screening, and we want to make that clear that that's fine with us as well. My heart is more than ever after talking to neighbors, and even our board meetings were really very profitable, and it was very encouraging to me, but also it was good for me to hear everybody's input. So I do come more kind of aware of everybody's position. Speaking to other neighbors, I really appreciate their position. For the most part, and I know others might speak, but I appreciate an awareness of our difficult situation, and I believe the unanimous opinion, we like to see our village prosper and our neighborhood in the corner do what it's been set out to do and have a healthy environment. And I believe we have that in agreement with the neighborhood. At the same time, I do respect and appreciate their position. They do love what has been established, and their concern is that they do not want to set a precedent, for variances such as these that would go beyond a hardship case like we have, and I respect that. And in that, I do emphasize that I come to you with a plea that we really seriously do have a hardship. We don't know what to do. Jeff Pittman was gracious to speak last time. He's a commercial broker, and he made it clear, and I'd be glad to have him speak again, but making it clear as he's reviewed and been involved in this that we have a very difficult situation in the marketplace with where we have. In addition, I've given you a statement you didn't have last time that just helps you see the allocation a little better, where you see the existing percentage of parking spots per square footage is very low. And so I added that to your packet. I don't live but a few miles from the office, as well as the other people in the village, and I just want to make it clear that my heart is to uphold the environment that we have tried to create here in Milton, I will go out of our way to visually create as much beauty as I can and a concern for the neighborhood and make it a very, very nice situation for everybody. My heart, and I believe the neighbors know my heart by now. We've had very good conversations. I really want our corner to prosper, and I want everybody to be satisfied in what they're seeing. So I'm not sure at this point if we need the PowerPoint presentation. I would be open to go through it again, but it is the presentation of what you have in front of you. There was another concern. People wanted to reiterate that we are not intending to put any commercial vehicles whatsoever there. We have no problem with that. It truly is going to be office space available. See if I have any other notes since the last time that we talked. Now, we are very, very committed to do this properly. So, yes, sir.
I would like the board and the public to hear from your commercial realtor regarding the hardship, so
Okay.
that point is restated.
That'd be fine.
Since that is not included in your PowerPoint.
Okay, Jeff?
If you'd state your name and address to the board, we'd appreciate it.
I'm Jeff Pittman with Piedmont Real Estate Group, 3380 Trickham Road, Woodstock, Georgia. The condition of the parking is such that it is not competitive when you look at the needs for office space generally. Office users typically look for between 3 to 4 spaces per 1,000 square feet to allow for adequate parking for their staff and employees. I'm not here to talk about the overall ordinance, but it has been my experience throughout multiple counties, Cherokee County, Cobb County, Fulton County, that this standard, if you will, is one that is broadly accepted and very helpful to the marketing of office space. Without it, it is difficult to entice people to lease office space. People need enough space for their visitors, they need enough space for their staff, and this ratio is something that is very typically, and you see in new developments. We've seen trends move higher in actual parking space requirements over the years. And there are in some cases outside of Milton where you have 5 and 6 and 7 spaces per 1,000 square feet in a call center environment. That's not what we're asking for. We're asking for a general office use, which applies to a broad range of people that can use the space. The way it's situated now is very difficult to envision that this would be successfully marketed because people simply aren't going to come to a place where they end up with 1 or 2 spaces per 1,000 square feet, and there's no place for their visitors and very little space for their staff and employees. So in my experience, over 25 years, and throughout the Atlanta area for the past 21 years, I would say that an adoption of this request is certainly in keeping with market trends and would constitute a relief for the hardship that we realize today. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have for it.
Thank you.
Thank you,
sir.
Thank you.
Any questions to the applicant from the board? Yes. Yes, sir.
I don't know if you have record of it, but did want to make it clear that these buildings have been vacant from 2007. So they literally have not been even used yet.
Thank you.
Were there any questions for me?
No, sir.
This time we'd like to open the floor for any public comment. And you have a total of 10 minutes for all of you together. And as you come forward, if you would state your name and address, we'd certainly appreciate it.
Sure.
And wait just a second till that starts.
Ready to go?
We seem to be having technical
Not
difficulties.
quite.
Sometimes technology is not our friend.
Go ahead, I've got it.
Okay, all
All right.
right. My name is Doug McCurry, and I live at 830 Hickory Flat Road, which is across the street from Leonard's Development. And I've been, like I said, I've been there since 1981. In regards to the rehearing of the petition for this variance requesting the buffer reduction, to me and other community people, I feel there are two issues to be considered. First, the master plan and its specific requirement for 50-foot buffers against property zone AG1 and/or residential. While I understand the need for the development to have sufficient basic amenities such as the parking that's been referenced in order to remain viable and sustainable, I would also, as I think Leonard mentioned in his initial statements, that stipulate that this should not be a precedent-setting type of a variance based on the plan, and that because of the hardship, that be the factors that are considered. The second concern is of a little more of a larger issue as far as it revolves around the plan and the community itself, is that the request no way compromise the current allowed commercial development at the crossroads. The Birmingham Master Plan identifies development across all four corners of the crossroads as a neighborhood node, and that is defined as 27.1 acres on all four corners. And it's critical that this tenant be observed and any eventual decision to approve or deny this variance, that the commercial extension should not go beyond what is already there. And I have met with Leonard and Curtis Mills, who's a neighbor but also owns property on two of the corners in the development. And given what Leonard has said earlier here about the assurances of the landscaping, shielding the parking, no commercial vehicles, I've agreed as a next door neighbor, more or less, not to oppose the request, provided that the commercial node, as it's known, as the neighborhood known, remain at the 27.1 acres, and that this not in any way be viewed as a step that could allow it to go beyond that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I got a question.
Sir, come. He's got a question before you come back up.
Oh, excuse me.
I just want to be sure, you said next door neighbor. Are you across the street?
Across the street, directly
Okay.
across the street.
Okay.
Particularly from the building that he's working on right now.
Okay.
If this is his building,
I understand.
my house, it's right over here, more of a catty corner.
Okay, and is it a house, a residence versus
Oh,
a
yeah,
business?
it's a
Okay.
residence. I live there.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay,
I've lived there since 1981, and
sure,
property has been in my family for a number of years. Used to belong to my grandfather.
okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
Thank you, sir.
Oh,
Thank you so much.
Any other public comment?
Scott Reese, doing business at 13685 Highway 9, Milton, Georgia. I'm here representing Mr. Tom Statham, who is the property owner directly west of the property or the area of the proposed variance. Mr. Statham, as we went over it the other time, is not necessarily opposed to the variance. He just has a few minor concerns. One is, as was discussed, the four-board fence. He would like for that to have a non-climbing wire attached with the reduction of the buffer. He wants to just have a little extra security as far as visitors, children climbing over, anything along that line. Also, he would like some input with the arborist, or to at least review the planning plan, or to meet with Mark or his representative, whoever that might be. That is, I guess, the major concerns that he would have. Otherwise, he understands the hardship and the vacant buildings, that they're really not doing any of us any good, and we're in support too that the plan that has the city or the city has of the four corners that we went over with staff will be adhered to. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I recall concern regarding lighting.
Yes, well, we are under the assumed position that the conditions that were approved prior or at the meeting before would be carried through.
That's not necessarily the case, so I want to make sure.
Yes,
We just want to make sure we're on the same page.
Our point, or his position would be that the agreed upon conditions, we're just, maybe I was a little out of, but my conversation with staff is that the recommendations made at the last meeting would be the recommendations of zoning conditions for this proposal, and I just wanted to, I did not, wasn't absolutely clear about the wire on the fence, and it seemed that the review with the arborist was new from last time. But the position is the conditions of the last meeting plus a little more emphasis on those other 2 points.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
sir.
Yes.
Any other public comment?
Good evening. I'm Curtis Mills. I live at 16355 Birmingham Highway, which is about 1 mile north of the crossroads on Birmingham Highway. I also own the property at 850 and 875 Hickory Flat Road, which is the northeast corner. It's the old BZA store, and then about 6 acres adjoining that. And I'm embarrassed to say that I also own Building 400 at 15800 in the complex in question. So I am both a building owner in the area that's requesting this variance, and across the street neighbor. I had joined Doug and Charna McCurry's property on Hickory Flat, so I have 2 perspectives. But I would say, just for background, that my building at Building 400 was called the Old Birmingham Hotel until the 1930s, which I've seen in some old deeds that go back. And as you may know, the old BZA store was built in the 30s, was replaced one that burned down. It's no accident that I own those 2 old historic structures. I'm really interested in the area, and I also live a mile down the road. So I'm interested in the area and the culture of the place. So with that said, I came into this. Is that the countdown clock? And I'm the last one. I'm not going to burn up all the time, but I don't want to go sideways and run out of time. So I have mixed feelings about this. Spent a lot of time with Leonard, spent some time with the McCurrys, and also a number of other people in the community. And I have a couple of comments, but in short, it's pretty obvious that Fulton County had a bad day when they approved that parking for those buildings. Last month, as a building owner there, and I run my business out of that location, we had a quarterly meeting, happened to have 2 local kids who were summer interns, college students, and some people from out of town, so we filled up our conference room, had someone in each office, and I and at least a couple of other people parked in Joe Whitley's building space, that's Building 300, and Wells Fargo, and for the first time I had to wonder if I was going to be towed. I mean, it happened, and as Leonard said, 100 and 200 aren't occupied yet. So we're not even seeing the saturation. With that said, I've got more parking spaces for my building per 1,000 square feet than Leonard does for 100 and 200, but it's still short. So we have a problem, and the solution that he came up with allows 6 new spaces to be available for general use for peak and overflow. They're not close to my building, but at least we wouldn't be parking in someone else's spot and maybe getting towed. We're all friends now, but who knows what's going to happen in the future. And so with appropriate landscape buffer, and we've talked about that in detail, and I'm pretty confident that's going to happen, and will be involved with Leonard's approval. I think it's a good thing for the corner. A healthy commercial node is usually a good thing for the local community. As the owner of the property across the street, who only bought it to protect it from being a CVS or something like that, I'm interested in precedent and retaining and maintaining the character of the area. On my behalf and on behalf of the McCurrys, and Doug already spoke, but several other community members, and then Joe Whitley asked me to make this comment. I would ask that somehow it could be read in. It wouldn't be a condition, but maybe some kind of a statement that says that it's understood by this body, because you can't tell a future body what to do, but it's understood by this body that the granting of this variance is only related to the hardship existing for our corner, and not intended to be any sort of a statement about adjoining property, or, as Doug said, the 27.1 acres in the Birmingham neighborhood node. And I assured several of our neighbors that I would pass that along. Also, Leonard has agreed not to park commercial vehicles, construction vehicles, or things like that in overnight. I think it might have been a condition last time, but I told someone that I would say that again, and Leonard's fine with it. So that's my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any questions? Any other public comment?
Time is up.
Okay. Sir, you have the opportunity to make a rebuttal statement or anything else you'd like to say.
Just appreciate your consideration.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any questions to staff from the board? Yes, sir.
I do have a question. Counselor, can you clarify for those present what precedence means and how that doesn't apply?
Yeah, variances are a slightly different creature than, for example, the rezoning that one might expect to hear. Variances are very tightly tied to the individual property, the individual hardship of that specific property, and the particular regulation attempted to be enforced or to get a variance from. So for the most part, a previous variance will not have any bearing on a subsequent variance on a different property with different considerations. That's generally where you start from. If you had exactly the same property with exactly the same situation, with exactly the same requests, and which you're just not going to find property as individual. I mean, theoretically, but you won't.
Is there a way that other than your statement there, and as part of staff, to make that clear in our judgment here?
It's not really one that is going to be something that you can dictate. It's just the way it is. If it's a constitutional issue of equal protection, is the only way that something could come up, and that would supersede anything that you might say. Again, in light of the individuality of property, it's just such a small likelihood that a variance process would implicate a precedent as it's generally perceived.
Right. I mean, we've understood that as a board. I wanted to make it clear to the because it was pointed out that this is not a precedent type of situation. Variances just don't fall into that category. So, thank you, Counselor.
Any other questions to staff? This time I'd like to close the public hearing and the floor is open for a motion. Yes, sir.
Chair, I'd like to make a motion. This is involving petition V14-014 at 1580 800 Birmingham Highway. This is to reduce,
I think it's 012.
I think it's 1-2.
I'm sorry, V14-012. That's why I should be wearing glasses all the time. At 15800 Birmingham Highway. This is a variance to reduce the 50-foot buffer to 10-foot in order to put, to add parking. The conditions are the parking lot island and buffer planting around this new parking lot area shall meet ordinance requirements. Landscape plan is to be approved by the city arborist. The buffer, second condition is the buffer shall be revegetated to provide screening from the adjacent property and Hickory Flat Road. Landscape plan to be approved by the city arborist. 3, a 5-foot high 4-board black fence with welded wire shall be placed along the west property line. 4, lighting of the new parking lot shall be directed away from the western property. 5, lighting from the fixtures on the new parking lot shall not leave this site. And 6, no overnight parking for licensed commercial vehicles shall be allowed in the new parking area.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second. Any discussion?
I have one question, if I may.
Okay.
Can you explain the difference between the welded wire versus the term that one of our
Non-climbing.
non-climbing wire? What's non-climbing wire versus welded wire?
I can answer that, because I do, I'm in my business.
Can you?
Can I answer?
I don't know if you can.
Well, Mark, look, is the width of.
Yeah.
Yeah, so say the typical wire is what, like 2 by 4 inch openings, and the non-climbable is just much smaller openings where you can't get your fingers and toes into.
Oh, to hop over.
And it's 1 by 2, if I remember
1 by 2.
correctly.
Yeah, I never did that as a child, so
Any other?
And again, the reason I put the welded wire in there is really to keep trash from blowing on the adjacent property. I felt like that was a good thing to have that, because it is a commercial area, that having that welded wire would stop any debris from being blown onto your property and therefore would lessen some of the complaints you might have.
Any other questions? We have a motion and a second to approve V14-012 to reduce the 50-foot buffer to 10 feet to allow additional parking with the following condition. 1, parking lot islands and buffer plantings around this new parking area shall meet ordinance requirements and the landscape plan to be approved by the city arborist. 2, the buffer shall be revegetated to provide screening for the adjacent property and also on Hickory Flat Road. Landscape plan to be approved by the city arborist. Number 3, a 5-foot high 4-board black fence with welded wire shall be placed along the west property line. Number 4, lighting in the new parking lot shall be directed away from the western property. Number 5, lighting from the fixtures on the new parking lot shall not leave this site. And number 6, no overnight parking for licensed commercial vehicles shall be allowed in the new parking area. All in favor, raise your right hand. Opposed, same sign, and passed unanimously. Thank you. Good luck. I know that she's gonna put the agenda back up again. I don't have one.
Angela, can you put the agenda back up?
Cynthia.
Yeah.
Here.
we had to spend another night here.
It's all right.
Thank you.
Oops,
Okay,
one
they
more.
pay us for
I
this.
know.
That's why we get paid the big
Appreciate your
bucks.
time.
Big money.
Your family.
That's right.
Oh, thank you.
He's buying beer later.
I wrote on this one.
I have
Oh,
notes.
that's okay.
Yeah.
Y'all can keep it. Thank you, thank you. Bye-bye.
Take care, good luck.
All right, Mr. Chairman.
V14-013, 100 Hopewell Grove Drive. Angela, will you please present? This one's deferred too.
Can we just approve the deferral? Do we have to?
I think we do.
Mr. Chair, staff would like to request a deferral for this case. We are still working with the applicant to get some additional information. They have some new features on their site, which may be a factor in the board's decision, so we need to get site plans reflecting that, and we're still working with them on the building itself. So we would like to request another deferral till next month.
Do we have a motion to defer?
Sure.
I'll second
I
the
make a
motion.
motion to defer.
To defer what?
Oh, that wasn't a...
V14-013 to defer till the next Board of Zoning Appeals meeting.
Do we have a second? Well, any discussion? We have a motion and a second to defer V14-013 to the September 2014 BZA meeting. All in favor, raise your right hand. It passed unanimously. Any consideration of appeals?
None.
Any old business?
None.
Any new business?
I do just have one thing, just so you know, starting next month, staff will be making a recommendation to the board. So I'll be using the 4 standards of consideration.
I'm sorry, would you like to expound on your statement?
I'll be like we do in rezonings, I'll be making a recommendation for approval or denial.
Oh, okay.
And what makes that different than what you do now? Now you just give us
Conditions.
conditions and that's
Well,
it?
facts, yeah, just facts.
Now, don't you give us, will you still be giving us facts?
Oh, yeah, I'll still do the staff report.
But you're gonna take a position.
Correct.
Well,
The
that'd be a
the
problem.
city of Milton's gonna take a position?
Staff.
Staff.
Now, is that good? I mean, I'm just out of curiosity, why are we changing? Why are you guys changing? Excuse me?
God spoke.
Directions from who above?
Right, is this from the mayor, or is this from
this
the
is suggestion of the planning
director?
Director from who?
The planning director.
Maybe we don't wanna
and
hear
the
from
city
you.
manager.
If we don't want your opinion, do we have to listen to it?
There you go.
They're just giving you a hard. I make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Let's go. That's weird that they're now gonna tell us.
But they do.
In situations where you kind of would like to have an idea where